Welcome back to the Redeemed podcast. Before we get started, don't forget to sign up for the Redeemed newsletter. That newsletter goes out every other week. It's a great place to follow along everything Redeemed podcast, a little bit more about me and my story. If you know what it's like to be a parent, the ups and downs and struggles of parenting, my guest today, Kate Kennedy, knows what that's all about. She heard God's voice calling her to do something so out of her comfort zone. Today, Kate is going to share with us how she started a school for children that are homeless and how that ministry began, what it looked like as she walked through a daunting process of doing something that she had no clue. Sometimes God's going to call you to do things that you don't know how to do. When you don't have the answers and you don't have the resources, you're not the expert. He is the expert, and you have to lean into him. So welcome, Kate, to the Redeem Podcast. Have you ever found yourself struggling through life's unexpected twists, wondering, this isn't what I planned or hoped for? If so, you're not alone. Life rarely goes as expected, even when we think we've mapped it all out. Psalms 107:2, let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story, those he redeemed from the hand of the foe. Welcome to the Redeem Podcast, a place of encouragement and hope. Through honest conversations and powerful interviews, we'll explore incredible stories of transformation and resilience, even in the face of the impossible. I'm Lauren Burns, your host, and I'm so glad you're here. Kate, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. We were talking about where you were in life before you began this journey of opening a school for children that are homeless. Would you take us back to that spot about your son and what things looked like before God called you to this mission?
Oh, yeah, sure. I have four children, 3 boys and a girl, and my second son has some pretty significant learning differences. I was a stay-at-home mom for 20 years. I was president of the PTO at their school, and I volunteered, and I also worked a lot in the homeless serving population. With all of my resources and support networks, it literally took every bit of my energy to advocate for my son. He even went to a special school. I still had to be his daily advocate to keep him from falling through the cracks. I just felt like, what do these other moms do? What do they do with their children? How do they handle all this? They're alone. They don't know where they're going to sleep at night. They don't know what the next meal is going to be. They can't advocate. I can hardly keep my children going along. I just can't imagine. I worked at a socially oriented church, and we are known for creating and spinning off really large, amazing nonprofits in the area. The Atlanta Community Food Bank, which is tremendous, and Communities in School, which is now a national after-school program. Those all started in the basement of my church. I was working with a lot of the organizations that had begun in my church and then spun off into the community. Most of them are in some aspect serving a population of unhoused.
Here you are, a mom, and like you said, you have 4 children, but your son Crawford, he struggling, and so you can have that heart and you can relate. You're like, I relate to what you're going through on a different scale, and so God planted that seed in your heart,
Yes.
and you're like, I've got to do something. But how much easier would it be for you to turn your head away and just focus on your own stuff, because you still had a lot going on?
Yes. I've never felt a more strong and clearly God-placed call than I did to start this school. I could not do it. And I didn't have a background in education. I didn't have a background in nonprofit administration. I was a television producer, and then I was in ministry before I decided to stay home with my kids. I wasn't, quote, qualified to do these things, but God wanted me to do it. And I tell you what, I tried not to do it. I tried to find every excuse in the book not to do it. In fact, the name of the school is the Boyce Ansley School. And Boyce Ansley was a mentor of mine. She was at my church. She was in leadership roles, many of which then I took over from her. And she just was a real firecracker. She was a tremendous fundraiser nationally, not just in the Atlanta community, but nationally. And I just casually told her one day that I had this urge, this feeling that this needed to be done. What I said to her was, somebody needs to start a school for these children. And she said, yes, you do. I said, no,
You're like, that's not what I said. No, no,
not
no.
me. Just somebody. Could you just work with your networks? Every time I saw her, she would say, have you started that school yet? I'll raise all the money you need if you start that school. Sadly, she died just as we had started. So I named the school after her because she was the one that God sent down that said, you got to just tap at her and tap at her until she can no longer not do this.
We were talking with Kathy Izzard's one of our friends as well. And that whisper, that thought that's
Yeah.
not your thought, that thing that just won't leave you alone. God's just chasing you nonstop. And
I didn't know what to do. One of the things that I want to say to everybody through sharing this story is that we can do hard things. And God does call us to do certain things, not necessarily the things that we plan to do or the things that we study to do. God calls us to do things. I think that God also calls us to connection. And I connected with every single person I knew. I started talking to people who were running nonprofits, who had started nonprofits. I talked to funders of nonprofits. I talked to people who were experts in education. I just said, okay, everybody, who wants to come along with me? And I got this great movement of people around me that were advising me, helping me figure out which way to go. It was really hard, but it was amazing because every time we hit what looked like a dead end, which we hit a lot of them, the door would open. It was just so clearly convened by God that people were amazed. I didn't try to do it by myself. I called all the people to come in and help me because so many people were called to be part of this process in their own unique kind of ways.
so you just started making phone calls. You're like, okay, God's put this on my heart. And you start making phone calls and the connections. How did you get the space for a school and credentialing?
My church is very good at inviting in new seedling ministries that then roll out into nonprofits. I approached the church and I also spoke with the director of Crossroads Community Ministries, which is a homeless serving agency that actually was started in our church that now serves the entire Atlanta community. I spoke to the director there. He said, I think this is a great idea. We decided we would start with a parents morning out program. So it was Tuesday mornings from 9 to 1. And my church offered the space to us for free. We were all volunteer led. And that was my baby step into this. But within 6 months, it was very clear that this was not actually what I was called to do. This was not serving the issue that I was really feeling on my heart I needed to be part of, which was a full-time elementary, middle school for children who are without housing. I wanted them to be able to go to a school that was as amazing and deeply grounded in research-based educational methods and reading methods as my son was going to, because everybody deserves that, whether they have money and privilege or not. Everybody deserves that. Every child deserves that. That's how we started. It is all laid out in the book. It is a hilarious at times, heartbreaking at times, and just hard.
I think one of the parts I was reading, and I don't know if it was at the very beginning stages or after you'd already opened the school, but there was a child that you couldn't get a hold of the parent, like those
Yes.
kinds of situations. Because again, you're talking about kids that are in homeless situations and maybe they don't have phones. These things are happening in real time. And you're like, what do we do?
Yes, and I always try to approach my goal at the school was to offer these children a really top-notch education, but also to be a safe place for the parents to come and to have their dignity and their worth recognized. When you live on the streets, they don't want somebody to give them money. They just want somebody to look them in the eye and say hello because they're a person. But as I said, everybody just looks away because they think we're going to ask them for something or we might hurt them or most of them just really would be so happy if you would look them in the eye and say, good morning or hi or something. We worked really hard to do that, but we had to learn a lot along the way because I always say you don't know what you don't know. And I grew up in a very sheltered, private community where everybody had a tremendous amount of privilege and everybody looked just like me. There were a lot of things that I didn't even know I didn't know. That was our first stumbling block was when this mom had given us a cell phone number and her child was really sick and her cell phone number was wrong. She either wrote down the wrong number or she had to change her plan which happens all the time. That was
Mhm.
just something we hadn't considered. Day by day, we would run into these situations and we'd have to regroup and think, okay, how are we going to do this now? How are we going to do this now?
How did you see God provide and show up in these situations? And how did your faith grow?
To see those families, to see the bond that was created between me and the families, we became a family, which was just so amazing because we all came from different places and different circumstances. It was really a beautiful thing to watch this community within our school grow. The other thing that I found that was a beautiful illumination of God in our program was things like we didn't know how we were going to get lunch for the kids. The school was getting within 2 weeks of opening and everything was ready, but we couldn't figure out lunch. We had a bare bones staff. We kept trying things and trying things. We had a sorority at Georgia Tech said that they would cook for us, but we had to come pick it up. I was like, who's going to have time in the middle of the day to go pick up lunch?
We got to
And
watch the kids and teach
right.
them.
Well, okay,
God,
that
we're not.
doesn't work. Like we had all these interesting offers, but we're like, yo, that I can't do that. Was introduced to a man who is a very part-time chef or cook at our church for special events or whatever. And somebody said, why don't you ask him? And I was like, well, he's not going to want to do that. That means he's going to have to be here every day. He could not have been more thrilled. And he really, I think the same way I felt a call to start the school, Kenny, and that's not his real name, but that's what I call him in the book. Kenny really felt that this preparing meals for these students was his calling. And he did not want to make just regular meals. He made amazing meals. The first day he fixed to them crab cakes and whole peaches and salad. And at first they were like,
What is this?
what is this? But then they ate it. And then he would come and he'd sit with them and he'd talk to them and he'd read them stories. They loved Mr. Kinney. They loved everything about Mr. Kinney. And he said, I'm bringing your culinary experience to you today. But he really took it on as his like role in life. And we learned so much from that. And so just little things like that would happen. You'd think, where did that come from? And how amazing is
You know that that's God. God's like, hey, I'm waiting to show off if you let me.
Yes. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. There are people out there who will fund you if you're not faith-based.
Yeah.
They will not fund you if you are not faith. I felt really strongly that I wanted to put in our mission statement that we were faith inspired because that is why I did this.
Yeah, that was the
Because my
truth.
faith
Yeah.
inspired me, and our curriculum was secular, but our values in our school were very holy.
You're like,
It was
okay, I'm going
really
to step out
beautiful.
in faith because that's where you planted the seed and go
Right.
from there. That's just a good reminder to the person listening. You might have some crazy ideas, and like you said, if that thought doesn't go away, then pray about it and pursue it and watch what God does because you're right. Kate can't do it all.
Right. It does take, though, taking that first step. I mean, I think when you pray about it and you discern, okay, this is the journey. And sometimes you take the first step thinking it's the right step, and then you got to stop and reset. But as long as you just keep walking and keep praying, God just makes the path. What is that? We make the path by walking. And that is, I think, really true.
Because you have to start somewhere. Like you said, starting it out like you did, you learn, you maybe
Yeah.
stumbled, but you learned along the way and you're moving in the right direction. What did your husband say whenever you're like, hey, honey, this is what I want to do? Because it affects your whole family. You
It
had four
did.
kids.
It did. I completely changed the rules of our family. I had been home for 20 years with my kids, and and when I started this, my oldest son was a freshman in college. I still had three of my kids at home with me. They were so proud of me. And my husband was so proud of me and so supportive of me. But you could tell there were those days where they were like, oh my gosh, mom, when are you going to cook dinner? Or like, wait, there's no groceries. Why are you still on your laptop?
Yeah. Have you
um,
been at my house lately, Kate? I feel like you're talking about my life.
yeah. So you're like, so I did have a lot of guilt for feeling like I changed the rules on my family. Like, we didn't really have a discussion because originally my plan was not to be at the school every day, all day long. My plan was to get it going, to be the fundraiser, and to have it staffed because I didn't know how to run a school. But again, you don't know what you don't know. And when the school opened, somebody had to be there all day long, taking care of all of those emergencies. When you don't have housing, you are just living crisis to crisis to crisis. And somebody's got to be there to handle all that as it relates to your children and your schooling. And that was me. And there was nobody else to do it. And so either I was going to do it or it wasn't going to get done. And so all of a sudden, I'm working 100 hours a week and my family is at home going, "Where are you?" They were holding it in tension. "We're really proud of you, Mom. We're so excited you're doing this. And seriously, who's going to pack my lunch?"
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
could you get some bread on the way home when you finally come home?
right, exactly. But
What were the grades that you had in the school?
so we started with a pre-K, and the
Okay.
goal was to build it pre-K to 8th grade and add 1 grade every year. And now the school goes from pre-K to 5th grade.
Wow.
And I think 7 of the 9 students we started with in pre-K are now in the 5th grade. They're just amazing. They're just absolutely amazing. So that's really exciting. So the goal is to get all the way to 8th grade. And then we've partnered with a high school that serves children from underserved communities and then helps them with college. Our scholars, if they want, can matriculate to that school. Generational poverty is a thing that I think a lot of people don't understand. You hear all the time, "Oh, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps or just go out and do that." But for generations and generations, your family has had precarious housing and limited educational opportunities, and so limited career opportunities, there's really a very slim chance that you're going to be able to break out of that unless somebody steps forward and gives you a chance. We talk about code switching, which was something I didn't know about. We know about it, not by name necessarily, but because it was modeled for us by our parents. We speak differently with our friends than we would in a job interview, than we would to a teacher. We change the words we use, we change our inflection. But if nobody modeled that for you because nobody in your family had professional opportunities or educational opportunities, then you never learn how to do it. And if you
Mm,
go into a job and you don't use the right language, business
right.
language, you're not going to get the job. Right.
It's huge impact in social norms that never learned. So going to school is so much more than maybe what we think of as going to school, and you're being those examples and those models.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The guilt that we have as parents of you're being pulled, you're working that 100 hours, you're pouring into these other kids. But at the end of the day, look at the example you're also being for your children, even though it may not have felt that way at the moment.
Yeah, my children, they were so proud of me. I think that's one of the greatest gifts. In fact, my oldest son, I said at the time, was a freshman in college, and he had said, "Mom, you don't need to follow me on Instagram anymore. I'm a freshman in college. I'm going to do my own thing." I was like, "That's fine. You're in college now." And he posted this lovely tribute to me and the school, which I didn't know about. And his girlfriend said, "Did you see what he posted?" She pulled it up. And I was like,
Oh, I
"Yes."
would have been a hot mess crying.
I
Like,
know.
oh,
It was just amazing. I think one of the biggest things about this book, besides telling my story of how I started the school, which is just fascinating and beautiful. You can just see God in every step of the way, is the fact that I then had to leave the school. It was my choice, but it wasn't my choice. It was difficult. It was gut wrenching. Both my parents died while I was running the school during COVID. Both my parents died during COVID. The school didn't close during COVID. There was a lot of racial tension in the world. As I said, I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but it was terribly hurtful. And it was really gut wrenching that I had to walk away. And I'm no longer involved in the school at all. It's still going, but I'm not involved. The second half of the book is another challenge of how do you go on from that? This was this holy call. God said, "Do this for me." And then I failed. I didn't fail, but I felt like I had failed. It depends on what day it is, you know? That's an important thing for people to take away too, is what happens? What impact does it have on your children when they watch you just crumble and they hear people saying ugly things about you. What does that look like for your kids? How do you handle that? How do you then grieve yourself? You're sitting in the darkness.
Okay, the loss of two parents in a short amount of
Mhm.
time, and that alone is heavy and a lot of grief. How did you respond? I think, and I know in my past, when I've gone through hard things, I get angry at God and I'm like, wait, you called me to do this. How did you respond initially? What did that look like?
Initially, I just was filled with shame. I was embarrassed and I was ashamed. I talk about it in the book. I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram.
Yes. Uh-huh.
It's a personality modeling system.
Yes.
I'm a 3, which is called the quote achiever. And so my biggest fear is being worthless. I like to do the right things and I like for people to say you're doing the right thing. I was just really embarrassed. And I felt like I'd failed God. I felt like I'd failed my family. And I just really sunk into myself for a long time. I wasn't out and about in the world. I didn't, because the world had gone on without me while I was running the school, and I couldn't figure out how to jump back in. And I felt kind of irrelevant. Now all my kids were leaving home, and I
Mm.
didn't have the school anymore.
Yeah, your identity.
Yeah. My husband said, and now we joke about it, but we didn't at the time. We had this conversation that he should put on my tombstone. She tried, you know. Bless her heart, she tried. But yeah, it's really hard.
We were talking in the green room too about Brandy's episode
Oh,
of
yes.
divorce. And so
Yeah.
as you're talking right now, I think so many people can relate to that identity of feeling shame and a failure through a divorce and a
Yes.
separation and a huge
Yes.
loss. You're grieving this job, and not just a job, but what you created. It's all those layers. That identity of this, I'm Kate Kennedy and this is what I've done and this is what God's called me to do. And you're like, wait, what just happened? I was obedient and I was prayerful and I stepped out in faith. Now what?
Yes. When I was listening to Brandy on your podcast, I so connected with what she was feeling and what she was saying. And so many people on your podcast, I do like it's a big thing. I'm reading this book, Emily Freeman. Are you familiar with Emily Freeman?
No. Mm-mm.
Race for the Good Girl. I kind of felt like she had climbed inside my body and like taken my personality out and laid it out, my deepest thoughts and laid it out in this book. Because
Mhm.
it's about when you're a good girl and you do all the things you're supposed to do and you listen to the call and you follow the call, but you still just beat yourself up because you just have a hard time believing that you're already enough. It's a really amazing book, but I've been reading that, but it's still so hard. It's easy to say, just believe. And so then you start thinking, gosh, I'm doubly bad now because I'm trying to believe, but the shame's not going away.
Mm.
And you said something just a minute ago that I thought was interesting about getting mad at God.
Mhm.
I had never dared to get mad at God until I was recently taking this theology class, and our assignment was to write a lament at God. It might have been one of the most like releasing things I've ever done. Wow,
Mhm.
I should do this more often. That feels really good.
Yeah.
And we're
Because he's
good.
like, I already
I
know how
know.
you feel, so just let me have it.
Right. Quit being so sweet.
Yes. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. Yell
It's
at me. Yell at me. Get it
yeah.
out.
Well, and this life is broken. That's the
Yeah.
thing that it's hard to remember. This is a broken life. And we're doing what we feel like God's calling us to do, but He doesn't promise that it's going to be easy. Opening the school and being a part of the school is not the end of your story. He's got so much
Right.
more in store for you, sharing this book and ministering to people in another way. And He knows that next chapter. But it's hard. We want to know the big picture. But God,
Yeah.
I wanted to see this through.
Right. And I still would like to see a little few more steps into the future. You can just tell me how then I'm good. I can get through all the hard times. You can just tell me, but that's not how it works.
I love your honesty. You're like, wait, yes, I've written this book. There's been amazing things, but let me tell you the hard stuff at the end.
Oh, yes. In the end, it's all been beautiful and painful. I wouldn't have done it differently. This is not easy, but life's not easy. I talk about in the book the difference in a do-gooder and a change maker. God doesn't always necessarily call us just to be do-gooders. A do-gooder is somebody who does good until it gets tough, and then they move on. A change maker is somebody who like stays in through the
Mm.
darkness, through the pain, through the complications. You just stay in it because you got to make change. God wants us to make change. That's important. And I think a lot of people just do the good things and then don't really stay in through the tough parts, which is where the real stuff happens.
That's important in marriage.
It's
I mean,
yes,
that's important with children. It's not going to be a fun, easy road. It's going to be hard. You're going to have hard stuff that you've got to go
yes,
through. Are you going to stay in it? Are you going to persevere? Are you going to pursue God in it and lay it all at his feet and be faithful?
yes.
That's the change, right?
It's just, yeah, it's hard. I dove into myself after I left the school because I was, as I said, very ashamed. And I was there for a long time. And I started writing the book really kind of as a cathartic for me to really find words to explain what happened. And then I realized that I needed to write down the story of how we founded the school because what happened in the end isn't the whole story. It's one tiny part of a really beautiful story. So I wanted to go back and I wanted to share with people all of the hope and the beauty that's happening. In the end, being by myself and drawing into myself wasn't helpful in healing. Once I put the book out and I've been going around and talking to groups, people have been so supportive. And I think that is God showing up in so many ways, showing me like you have this community of people who believe in you, who think that you're a good person, who know the whole story now and have your back. And that's tremendous. That I think
Mm-hmm.
that's God's dream for us. We're each other's God's greatest gift to us is each other. If we don't lean into that, then we miss the present.
Yeah, the devil wants us to stay in those dark places. He wants
Yeah,
us to stay alone and isolated and believing those lies because when
yeah,
we come out and God talks all about community, what Aaron and
yeah,
her holding up the hands over and over again in the Bible, that's community. And God's like, I need you to be around your people to speak truth into your life.
right. It's important, but it's easy to forget, especially like you fail God. I'm just going to hide here and nobody will notice me. At least that kind of is my MO.
Oh,
And
yours and everybody else's, and that shame. We talked about divorce earlier, but all kinds of things, loss of a child, a miscarriage, you name it,
yeah,
guilt and shame, and we hide and we don't tell anybody. And then when you start sharing and speaking, other people are like, it's okay, I've gone through that too. And
yeah,
those walls come down. And that's why people are like, no, Kate, we want to read your book. We want to encourage you and walk
yeah.
alongside you. Tell us the name of your book.
It's called Once Upon a School, a story of dreaming big, falling hard, and bouncing back. My favorite place to buy it, and I'll just give a plug out for them, is bookshop.org.
Okay, I'm writing it down.
Bookshop.org, they have it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Bookshop.org is a nonprofit that supports independent booksellers. And you can
Oh,
go to bookshop.org and you can order the book and you can put in there the independent bookstore in your community that you would like the proceeds from the book to support. And they support that independent bookstore. I'm a big fan of independent bookstores. I always try to steer people that way.
yeah. I'm glad you educated me on that today.
I think the biggest thing I've learned is to trust myself because I didn't trust myself. That is something that women, especially women who stay home with their kids for a long time, and for some reason those skills don't seem to look transferable into the professional world, even though they very much are.
Mm.
I should have trusted myself
Take
better.
take a leap of faith. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kate, where's the best place for people to find you?
I have an Instagram, Kate Kennedy Writes. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, and I have a website which will
Okay.
send you to all of my places, katekennedywrites.com.
I will link everything in the show
Oh,
notes so
great.
it's easy to find you. Anything else you would like to say that we did not cover?
Gosh, no, this has been such a great conversation. It's always amazing to me, and I'm going to chalk this up to a holy thing too, when I do a podcast on the book and the direction that it goes in so many different ways. And this has just been a really beautiful conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and for everybody for listening. If you read the book and you want to talk more, I'm always love doing Zoom book clubs. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you for your time and thank
Thank
you for
you.
sharing with my audience today. Not every story is going to be easy, just like the life that we live. The last few chapters of Kate's book, one is called Falling Hard, and another Integrity and Grace. That's life. Sometimes we fall hard, even with Kate following exactly what God called her to do. She's impacted those young lives and then the lives of every individual that one young life touched. But she also went through a lot of grief and hardship. In one of her chapters at the end, it says, I know that I did a really good job of building, running, sustaining, and growing a program that was bigger than any of us. I know that it took more courage and strength to walk away than to stay. I know that I left with integrity and grace. Kate doesn't know the end of her story, even as she has written a book and she's in the process of going and speaking and sharing all that God did in this journey. She's still ministering to people. And maybe that's you. Maybe you know what it's like to go through something hard, or you're in the middle of it right now and you've been on the mountaintop where you've seen God do amazing things and you've been faithful and you have been obedient and you have walked in faith when you were so fearful. And then you've come down off that mountaintop into the valley and you're like, God, where are you? Why am I having such a hard time now? I want to remind you, God is still with you. He hasn't left you. He's still doing mighty things in your life. Even in the valley, think of Job, all the loss that Job went through, and so many other people in the Bible over and over again. The world that we live in is not the end of our story. Our treasures are stored up in heaven, and it's hard to remember that at times. But I want to remind you, keep your eyes on God. He is faithful to see you through the hard things. If you might be one of those people right now walking through difficulty in your marriage, finances, in your job, difficulty in a relationship with a child, whatever it looks like, I would love to stop and pray over you right now. Father, I thank you for Kate. I thank you for the things you've brought her through. God, that you are the Father who redeems. You are the one that takes the things that we've gone through and you pour them into other lives to build them up. God, for the person listening, you know each individual person by name. You know every hair on their head. You know every situation and circumstance. God, I ask that you would pour into them. Holy Spirit, that they would feel you, that they would see you, that you would speak to them in their dreams, God, that you would put people in their life to speak truth into them, God, the encouraging words that they need, that they would be able to lift their eyes off their situation and onto you. And God, that you would be their hope, you would be their redemption, that you would be their strength and their healer. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for continuing to listen to the Redeem Podcast. If you're new to the Redeem Podcast, welcome. If you'd like to hear more about me and learn about my own story, you can find me at laurenburns.net. On Facebook and Instagram, Lauren Burns Redeemed. I share clips throughout the week, Bible verses, little clips of what's going on. I have a newsletter. Please subscribe to the Redeemed newsletter. I'll put the link in the show notes so that you can follow along as I am continuing the process of writing my book to share the details of my own story of being kidnapped and rescued and that forgiveness healing journey that I went through with my biological father. Until next time, I hope you have a fantastic day, that you know that you are loved, that you are chosen, and God calls you redeemed.